Excellent. Okay, so I'm going to have a quick 10-minute run through on our sustainable travel strategy entitled Balancing Mobility, and talk about some of the tools that we've developed to support that approach to balancing mobility in Ebbsfleet over the last 3 or 4 years. So a quick update really from a postcard from Ebbsfleet in 2021, just for those that aren't familiar. So I work for the Development Corporation, set up 5 years ago now to deliver the 21st century garden city. With increased ambition, quality and pace of development. And just to pick up 3 or 4 of the key points there that have had an impact on the kinds of tool and the kinds of approaches that we've been working with over the last 3 years. So first of all, we are the development control authority, but we're not the plan making authority. So we couldn't write our own local plan or develop planning policy, and are reliant on the 2 local authorities, which we span across, Dartford and Gravesham. Outline planning permission was already in place for 11,000 of the planned 15,000 homes. So a lot of the kind of principles were already set for the development before we were set up. We were fortunate to have a generous budget, getting on for £270 million, but no actual land to do anything with. So again, we had limited levers with which to have an impact on delivering the garden city, and we have a relatively small delivery team of only 30 people, which includes the planning team as well within that. So limited resource to bring forward the city. So a quick postcard just showing some of the deliverables, some of the outputs so far. So over 2,100 homes completed. 24% of the planned homes have got reserved matters application approval. We've already built some schools. And just 18 months ago, we finally bought our first major land holding. So the whole of the central area is now within our ownership, 149 hectares, and we are busy master planning that. So if we now focus on the transport strategy, a bit of background. So those original planning permissions were predicated on 40% of local journeys up to 3 miles being by sustainable modes. So 20% public transport and 20% walking, cycling. And it's fair to say that our pioneering residents over the last 5 or 6 years have had limited access to any kind of sustainable travel options. So they have been relatively car dependent, and that's one area that we have made significant improvements on over the last 12 months to address really. But when we were set up, the first thing we did was develop our master plan, which combined the existing master plans. We had 6 existing master plans for various developments across our area, and the implementation framework for Ebbsfleet combined those together. And they set out 6 key moves for the transport within Ebbsfleet. So first one won't be any surprise, and I think most of what I'm talking about tonight won't be particularly radical, but it's more about how we've gone about delivering it in a coordinated way. I think that's probably the more interesting and helpful aspect. But master planning the villages on a walkable neighbourhoods model on the basis of public transport orientated development corridors, so higher density along the public transport routes, delivering healthy streets and parks, and I'm going to talk a bit about that tonight. Enabling active Ebbsfleet. So that's active Ebbsfleet is our program for enabling walking and cycling, and we've done a lot of work on that primarily through our Healthy New Towns program. We were one of the pilot projects for Healthy New Towns, and we've done quite a bit of work on promoting walking and cycling through that scheme. Upgrading our existing bus system, Fast Track, to a rapid transit network, and the one that we're probably most interested in tonight, an evolving parking strategy. And that's important to note, and this has been a continuous point of discussion throughout the last 5 years, is really what parking strategy we should pursue. But we were well aware that a lot of the principles were set already in our planning permissions, and we wanted to develop that parking strategy, but there are a lot of views already on parking in place that we need to work within. And if we come on to those views, so that was a bit of the vision, and this is the reality, and I think Katia has already touched on a lot of this. But this is the kind of the day-to-day conversations that I'm sure a lot of us have. So, the house builders, sales teams telling the house builders they need to provide the parking spaces, the commercial advisors saying how that the parking spaces will add the premium. We've got the local councillors who are still dealing with having their fingers burnt from PPG-free schemes many years ago, for those of you who remember. And the reduction in parking around those, and they have not forgotten that, and are still dealing with the complaints from their residents. We've got the transport planners who want us to provide all the sustainable travel, but also want us to plan our roads so that they don't have any queuing on them, so they're as convenient as possible for people to drive through, which isn't necessarily an aligned approach. You've got the home buyer in the middle of it all, who, even when they don't necessarily want the parking space, they do recognise the value assigned to that parking space and want to protect their investment. And then we've got our design review panelists who are asking us, why aren't we aiming for a car-free development? And I sit somewhere in the middle of all of that, as I'm sure many of you do. So that led us to really develop our sustainable travel strategy a few years ago. So I think we were recognising, for those that have visited Ebbsfleet, you will note that that a lot of our earlier developments are very much a conventional house builder model and a conventional approach to parking provision. And there was a disconnect really between the types of houses, the types of parking being provided, and then that vision that we'd established for the 21st century garden city and the healthy new town, and the kind of lifestyles and the transport systems that we were looking to deliver. I think it's worth highlighting that there were lots of local views, and some of those views were becoming fact, even though there was no evidence to support that. And so we saw the sustainable travel strategy as a way of engaging on a collaborative research project with our planning committee to kind of explore parking and understand it. Really, it was very much a data-driven approach. We wanted to kind of dispel the urban myths and really get to the facts about really what the parking demand was from our pioneering residents that had already moved in, what the demand was, how parking was being delivered, and whether it was actually being delivered in the right places. And really to get to grips with that reality and the perceptions around parking across the garden city. And yeah, it was very much data driven. So we undertook parking surveys of our existing residents. We looked at demographic analysis. So for example, we found that a lot of our residents that moved in did only have the single parking space. They didn't need the 2 parking spaces. The kickback, of course, was, well, this is still a young, immature neighbourhood, and therefore, as the neighbourhood matures and those households mature, their children get older, then they will need additional parking. We were able to go back and do some demographic analysis and prove that actually the demographic makeup of our new communities was very similar to the maturer existing communities in the surrounding Dartford and Gravesham area, and dispel that kind of urban myth. So that was a really helpful project, and it was more about the process of developing the strategy and bringing the planning committee with us. That was as important as the end output. So if I just quickly come on to the end output. So the strategy is actually based on 5 steps to developing your sustainable travel facilities and your parking facilities within your scheme. And we're trying to kind of flip it around. So rather than going straight to working out what the parking standards are for your site, you start out with modelling your sustainable travel trips. Then you calculate what parking demand you have left over, what's the remainder need for parking. You then locate that parking discreetly. You provide the charging facilities for that parking. And then probably one of the most important aspects, often forgotten, is we need to proactively manage that parking as well going forwards. And that's a key part of the strategy. So I'm just going to go through some of our tools we're using to implement some of this very quickly. So that first point, working out which trips will be by sustainable travel and providing those facilities. So something we undertook was an active travel model a couple of years ago. So working with Space Syntax, and we will ask the question, how do you work out where people want to walk and cycle and what the capacity of those networks will be when you don't have an existing population to model or to ask? So we established some scenarios with some target modal shares. So we worked out what the modal share was we were aiming for, and then we worked out which of the trips across the garden city were the most likely to convert into walking and cycling. So we kind of worked our way backwards, basically, from the target. We then did some demographic analysis of comparable developments on the edge of London. We mapped that onto a CAD map of the completed garden city, and using using the model, we were able to then develop some mappings of scenarios, basically. So if I just take you quickly through some of these. So, for example, this is the 20% walking and cycling scenario. So this is combined for school commuters, for commuters to our train stations, and commuters to our workplace destinations. And you can see here the mapping across the garden city. We start to have an understanding of how many people are going to be walking at that peak scenario in the morning. So how do we actually use that in practice? So, for example, here's Alcadon Education Campus, just got planning permission 2 weeks ago. Really exciting scheme, right in the heart of Alcadon Village. So we're bringing the school right into the middle of the village, not sitting it back in its own grounds. So it's a part of the everyday activity going on in the village. And we've actually been able to reduce parking for this scheme by 40% compared to the conventional parking standards for set out by the Highways Authority. We've got no planned drop-off facilities within the site, so it's a distributed drop-off approach. So you drive to a car park located within the village and the village centre rather than the school itself, and we distribute those car parks around the outside of the campus to avoid people driving to the main entrance. You can see this is a view across the entrance plaza. And this is also the fast track route. So it's a bus only route running from the left to the right that will drop students right outside the school. How were we able to convince the planning committee to grant the approval with such a low amount of parking and no drop off? Well, we were able to use the model that proved that most, if not all, of our students will be within a 10 to 15 minute walkable distance of the secondary school. In actual fact, when we modelled it, we believe that 95% of students will be within 10 minutes walk of the secondary school, and 100% will be within 5 minutes walk of the primary school. So we're able to prove that we are able to deliver a sustainable travel model for the school, and that allowed us to get the planning permission. Another one of our projects is our public realm strategy, and we've produced exemplar street designs. So these are street designs for a 50-metre section that we've designed for 4 different tiers within the public realm hierarchy. And this allows us to quantitatively analyse all of our streets being designed coming forwards through the planning system. So we count the number of street trees, we measure the area of planting, and we benchmark it against these designs. So you can see on the right hand side the key performance indicators, and we make sure we deliver the bare minimum as set out within the public realm strategy for the relevant street typology. So this is really driving the kind of garden city character of our streets going forwards. We still have to fight for every tree, particularly where there's the conflicts with street lighting, but we've seen about 40% increase in street trees within our streets since implementing this approach. We've also got our street health check tool, which we shamelessly borrowed from TfL and modified because we don't have the data sets. So we've turned it into a traffic light scoring system. And we use this in order to try and ensure we deliver against all the outputs for street design, not just safety and security, but we deliver for all of the design areas that you expect for a high quality street. So we've kind of mashed together Building for Life's kind of traffic light system, TfL's Healthy Streets check, in order to create a tool that allows us to then, again, objectively score street designs going forwards and encourage all of the different street specialists involved in the design of streets to take a shared ownership of all of the outputs, not just their own design specialism. So you can see some of the questions that are asked, and then we give it a traffic light score. If they get a red on any of the questions, then we go back and we review that until we get an amber, basically, is the system. One of my final points I just want to go through is to get your travel systems in place early before behaviours have been established. This is something that we probably haven't done as much as we would have liked to, but just in the last 6 months, we've managed to get off the ground our on-demand bus service that's running across the whole Garden City now. So there's 2 or 3 minibuses running in service at most times of the day. They run from 6 a.m. to 1 a.m. You book the ride on your smart app, and it advises you which pickup point, and it gives you an ETA and a price. Fares start from £1, and that runs initially until the fast track rapid bus system is up and running next year. Very quickly then, parking demand. So although we want people to try and calculate their sustainable travel trips first before calculating parking demand, we're aware that we have to provide a backstop on a maximum amount of parking. So this is what provides the maximum amount of parking that you can accommodate within a scheme. It's based again on data and mapping. So it's based on walkable catchments. And you can see if you're within a 5-minute walkable catchment of sustainable travel, you have a much lower parking standard than if you're outside of that. And that was actually tested, those parking standards were tested against the built form to make sure that we could actually deliver that much parking within the built form that we want on within those local centres, so we don't end up having excessive parking spilling out onto the street, etc. So this is just some modelling done to prove it fits in the built form. And then the third key part of the sustainable travel strategy is about how you locate the parking. And we've got quite a bit of guidance all available on our website, Designed for Ebbsfleet, setting out detailed guidance. And I guess the one that's most important is what to avoid. Was quite controversial, but setting out what parking typologies we want to avoid based on the house typology, basically, which you can see along the top. I'm running out of time, so I will quickly flick through this. This is just an example of the detailed design coding. You can see here that we've set out which of our streets across the city is appropriate for this parking typology, and some very clear design standards, which again, we've borrowed. We're very good at borrowing, learning from the best and applying it in Ebbsfleet. So this has come straight out of Great Knighton's design code and been applied as our guidance for parking in Ebbsfleet. So one of the last points, how will we measure success? Well, I've mentioned this quite a bit, but data, I'm very keen to incorporate data throughout all of our planning and assessments. So we undertake bi-yearly resident satisfaction surveys, asking them about parking. We undertake regular parking demand surveys every 2 years. We continue to explore how we can use new technology. We use Better Points within Ebbsfleet, and that gives us access to data from the Better Point system that allows us to understand where people are travelling across the city and therefore plan the routes accordingly. We use our street design evaluations and then the usual building for life and building with nature assessments. So all of those combined. And my last slide, key lessons, is so co-develop your approach to sustainable travel as widely as possible. We've worked with our development partners and most importantly the planning committee so that they fully support what we're advocating. Generate, analyse and apply that data throughout the planning, design and development control. We're increasingly using data analysis in order to assess planning applications, and Katja mentioned that point around amount of space being used for parking versus housing, and that's something we've started to do for our planning applications, assess that, get the travel systems up and running early, and then building the lifestyle brand into the place. So that idea around how you want people to travel across the city, build that into your lifestyle branding for the place. That's something we've been a slow off the mark on, but we're starting to focus on. And the last point really is to connect all your tools into a system so they all reference each other. So we reference our public realm strategy. We use that when we're assessing building for life, etc., so that all of the tools start to reference each other and work as a single joined up system to push the kind of place that we want to see in Ebbsfleet. Thank you very much. I'll stop there.
Thank you very much, Simon. That was a lot of information in 10 minutes. And I can only recommend going to the website and also kind of digging into some of the tools. I mean, I think really important points there to try to convince people is that we need the data, that we need to monitor the progress and learn from developments as they're built so we can adjust. And then also kind of the managing afterwards and always checking in with how things work. And actually developing the tools. I mean, I think their Ebbsfleet is in a really, really good position because it is a big new settlement. So you have the opportunity to actually develop these tools specifically.